And I'll say welcome to everyone to this webinar hosted by the IIM. This is actually the second webinar of our September 2021 series, which the first one was yesterday. And this series of 6 webinars follows on from the IIM survey, which was published several weeks ago. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's available on the IIM website. My name is Bruce Rayner. I'm a career interim of around about 28 years now and a member of the IIM board. You'll find my profile on LinkedIn. Please feel free to connect. So before we start today, let me explain a little bit about the series of webinars and the members only events that are happening during the course of September. And for that, I am now going to attempt to share my screen. So hopefully everyone can see this as we move on. Can you see this, Lynne?
Not yet. Sometimes there's a delay.
Okay.
Yep, you're on.
Okay, so this is the ad for the IIM for those of you that are not yet members. The associate membership there, £145, full membership £160, the initial assessment fee £40. The series of webinars, let me just get to the right slide, are these. So hopefully you can all see this screen. The one today, we're going to be talking about interim management over the next 12 to 24 months. And we're joined, as you can see, by David Webb, Laurence, Frantzis, and Lynne Colgate from, oops, have we lost the, have we lost that there? Yeah, sorry. It has an automatic timer. Each of the 3 leading ISPs who were voted 1, 2, and 3 in the survey. You'll see that weekly we have 9th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th. And after today, we then take deep dives into each of 4 specialisms: transformation, finance, HR, and digital. So if you haven't already signed up for these and you are interested or operating in any of those specialisms, the invitations are on the IIM website. I would also say that today and for the next, well, the next 5, today and the next 4, there'll be 2 45-minute sessions. One will be a general event open to anyone who filled in the survey and any other interested party. But then we'll go over to another link, which you should all have if you signed up for it, which is a members only event where we'll be able to rub virtual shoulders with our esteemed guests. So let me come out of this now and just share with you the speakers for the upcoming events. So for transformation, we're going to have Gavin Wingfield, Nick Berman, and Andrew Vox. Finance, Denise Raw, Alison Rotundo, and Ross Gordon, who's joining from Odgers. HR, Chris Arbid, Claire O'Donovan, and Sam Hawkins. And digital, Richard Lindsay, Ben Cowan, and David Kemble. So these are our practitioners in the interim space who will be up close and personal with the market and will be sharing their insights over the course of September. So without further ado, I'd like to get into this by really opening up with Lynne, who was on the presentation yesterday on the survey results, and just asking Lynne to share with us what the sort of high and low spots of that survey were, given that, as we mentioned this morning when we were having our kind of pre-chat, that survey was taken right in the teeth of the pandemic and probably reflects sentiment that was prevailing at that time. Drawing a line under that and moving forward will be the topic of what we're going to do today. So, Lynne, what was your takeaway from from that presentation yesterday.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. You might want to just stop sharing your screen so we can all go back to a main view.
Yeah.
That would be super. Thank you.
Okay, let me just see how I do that.
Not a huge problem if you can't, but
yeah, no, well, you carry on and I'll sort it out. I will carry on. I'll sort it out in the background.
Perfect. So yes, thank you to Tony and to Charles for hosting the webinar yesterday, and the three key themes that they were keen to talk about: IR35, personal business strategy, and the state of the market. So I think for me, I took a few really interesting insights from that. And around IR35, clearly it's here to stay and something that we will need to all learn to work with. But one thing that was interesting that I noted was 50% of all appeals that were made within IR35 actually resulted in a change of outcome. So I think that's a really interesting bit of information. There's a lot of talk about people leaving the interim market and looking at reasons for that. I know we're going to come on to talk about the permanent market, but certainly it seems there is a decent amount of people returning to the permanent market. But actually I noted that half the amount of people were planning on joining the permanent market in 2021 versus 2020. So actually there is a bit of perhaps a change in the thought process there. The amount of billable days in the last 12 months seems to be at a low point since 2014. But again, I think it's all quite self-explanatory based on the pandemic. But what we have been talking about as a group really is, as Bruce alluded to, that this was a snapshot in time, looking back really from, I guess, sort of April, May backwards. And we're all pleased to report as panelists that the market is certainly showing huge signs of improvement following the time in which the survey was taken.
So I'll just go around the table now, Lynne, and just ask you from Eton Bridge, Practicus and New Street, who I would imagine by volume are covering a pretty large share of or cross-section of the interim market space, to describe the kind of the demand, if you like, you're seeing now from clients from your own individual perspectives, to see if we can get some flavour as to the conversations that are going on in UK PLC at the moment relating to interim. Lynne?
Yeah, happy to kickstart that. And just for the audience, at Eton Bridge Partners, we cover both interim management and search across the corporate leadership structure. So I personally look after the CFO and finance practice, but today we're going to be talking about that whole corporate leadership structure from an interim management perspective. The conversations that we are having are really all around planning and gearing companies up for the next 12 to 24 months. A lot of that is associated with the M&A market, be that for PLCs. Others might have noted the article in the Times yesterday that there's a backlog of deals, and 1,300 business leaders globally were surveyed, and 87% of those are looking to do deals in the next 3 years. So, that coupled with a huge amount of activity within the PE space will result in some significant uptake of interims in our space. So certainly around M&A activity, that's a big piece for us at the moment, Bruce.
David, would you like to just comment on that from your perspective and give us a general flavour of the markets you cover and what you're seeing?
Sure. Yeah. So my personal role within in Practicus is to lead what we call the client engagement team, which is essentially the sales and account management team for anything that isn't health. So health is a really big area for us. We have a separate person that heads that up, and in health we have NHS and independent health, which are two very good markets for us. So I can give you a little bit of comment on health, but it's not my area of expertise. But I can certainly talk to you about everything else. So. and our focus as a business is change, it's business change and transformation. The vast majority of what we do is interim, but we are doing, we've been doing permanent really for the last 4 years now. It's making up a bigger chunk of what we do. So if I focus outside of health, this year's been a good year so far. And what we've been busiest with so far, and what we think we continue in this vein, is all things related to data and digital. So with regard to data, it's less about compliance and GDPR these days, but of course, that is still a concern, and some companies are a bit behind the curve and have particular issues to deal with. But with data, it's more about companies understanding actually what data do they hold, where does it sit, what journey has it been on, and what can they do with it, and how quickly can they make the business decisions that they need to. So we've got a lot of activity around companies really getting a grip of their data. And on the digital side, it's yes, there is still, of course, activity around the front end, the customer engagement side of things, which surprisingly, even in these times, a lot of companies are behind the curve with. But increasingly, it's the back end. It's actually automation of back office processes to improve quality, reduce errors, improve efficiency, and reduce costs. So we're seeing a lot of work in those areas too. And I think what has come to the fore over the last year is all things sort of people, culture, well-being, and that's been a real hot topic over the last year. And I think it will continue to be so, particularly as people start to drift back to the office. Companies will start publishing formal policies probably about what they expect people to do, but how they do that is the key question really. So I think there's going to be a call for people with that people and well-being, culture change lens as well. In addition to that, we started to see some big ticket programs that come back online, which were very much lacking last year. So, a lot of ERP programs were put on hold, or HR systems, that type of stuff. If it wasn't too late to stop them, and we're just starting to see some of those, multi-million-pound investments coming back online or picking up speed as well. So, no doubt we'll see a demand for project program management type resource, as well as maybe some more technical resource on those programs. And I do echo what Lynne said about private equity. We're definitely starting to see that market pick up, deals be done on the back of that. There will be demands for people to sweat the asset or integrate those companies into another or what have you. So we are starting to see that pick up now, and that should be a real key growth area, I think, for all of us over the next probably few years.
Laurence, do you want to come in on that and tell us a little bit about how New Street are seeing the world?
Yeah, sure. So thanks David, thanks Lynne. Well, probably one of the dangers of speaking third is inevitably there will be a little bit of repetition here. So I'll start with I'll sort of start with agreeing on a couple of points. So PE, yeah, very similar, very similar. I think it's probably more a case of when these opportunities start to come through. I think, as any interim provider will tell you, we're kind of 1 or 2 weeks before a deal is done, we get quite busy from a PE perspective, and then the 3 months after the deal is done, we get very busy with our private equity clients, because that's when things need to be investigated, certain changes are made, and there's a lot that needs to be done. So huge area for us as a business that just, quite frankly, hasn't been there for the last 12-18 months. So we are looking forward to seeing a return to just a return to the levels of deals activities that we were seeing before. But I think we keep hearing about this wall of money, and now kind of the more and more conversations I'm having, the more apparent that is very real. Actually, there's Gary Oldham, who's one of the founder of Endless, the private equity fund, was saying he anticipates record deal levels kind of as we travel into Q1, Q2 next year. So bring it on, basically. It'd be great for the industry. The other thing, this is probably echoing what Lynne and David have just said. There's definitely been, in the last 3 months, I was just having a look at it in advance of this call, just in terms of the mandates that we've taken on. There's definitely been a shift away from what I would class as tactical hiring of interims versus strategic. And we're seeing a lot more long view now in terms of the positions that are coming in. What hopefully that will bleed into is a broadening out of the sorts of interims that we're being approached to hire, because we the last 12 months we've seen less opportunities for a transformational MD or a transformational CEO. We've seen less of those, but on the flip side, particularly when we got very, very busy back end of last year, we saw higher levels of demand than we'd seen before for HR specialists, transformational specialists, CFOs, and interestingly, CMOs, chief marketing officers, which is something that we've always been very good at, but we haven't necessarily seen the same levels of demand that we've seen recently. So, and these have been to deal with certain specific short-term challenges that our clients wanted rectifying. Whereas as we move into a slightly more strategic mindset with some of our clients and increased deal flow, we anticipate that hopefully it will create opportunities for the MD, the group MD, and the interim CEO, who they could absolutely be forgiven for thinking that it's been a challenging market for the last 12 to 18 months. It has for those guys. Yeah.
Well, just following up on that, we have a question here from Paul Lehman. Thanks, Paul, who says the pandemic clearly isn't over, with deaths at a 6 months high yesterday. I think I saw, was it 50 deaths yesterday in the UK, or was that the previous day's figure?
Yeah, it was 200 and something, I think, yesterday.
Was it because of the weekend unwound, did it? What are your predictions about the impact of your work on any return to restrictions that may happen? So there's a fair bit of conjecture there, but to the extent that your crystal ball's as good as anybody, how would you answer that? Let's go to Laurence on that one first.
Thank you. And thanks for the question, Paul. Okay, so yeah, look, to an extent, we do go into the realms of conjecture and crystal ball stuff, because it depends how severe things get. If we look into the rearview mirror, which personally I'm not the biggest fan of doing, but I do think it's necessary sometimes to learn and also kind of shape how you might choose to move forward. Look, the reality is, if the pandemic comes back with a vengeance, we were actually talking about this morning, weren't we, guys? Then yeah, that's going to have an impact. That's not just going to have an impact on interim management or just the recruitment industry. It's going to be the whole country, the whole world. So yeah, let's hope that isn't the case. If it comes back to a level, the optimist in me, but also the pragmatist in me, thinks that we have now found a way to navigate our way around some of the things that we just weren't set up to handle in March 2020. Things like working from home, things like Teams, things like Zoom, things like social distancing and masks. We didn't have the vaccination program, and so on and so forth. So I don't think it will have as seismic an impact as it did the start of last spring. Clearly, if things get to a point where they are really, really severe, and the economy takes a nosedive again, then yeah, absolutely, interim usage will absolutely nosedive. The reason being, like David pointed out, certain projects that just aren't absolutely vital to a company's survival will get shelved. They just won't happen because they're not business critical. So if it's not about survival, it won't happen. And that's what we saw in the first 4 to 5 weeks of the pandemic last year. It was call after call, either standing interims down, standing projects down, or cancelling mandates that we were working on. It was pretty it was pretty miserable for that period of time. I don't foresee that happening again.
Yeah. David, Lynne?
Yeah, sorry, go on, David, you go.
Thank you. I was going to say, obviously, as always, it very much depends on the sector you work in as well. So, we weren't as badly affected by the pandemic as we feared we might be. If I think back to last spring, I think partly that's because of our strength in health, and although the flavour of the business changed, it was all about managing the pandemic and not turning around failing A&E departments or what have you. The business level was still there, it's just a different type. But of course, we did next to nothing in industries such as travel, retail, hospitality, because they weren't operating. So I think if the pandemic does come back with a bang, it will be those industries. In all likelihood, it'll be those industries that take the biggest hit again. And so if you're an interim that tends to work in those industries, unfortunately, I think you're going to have a tougher time than someone that works in, say, tend to work in software businesses or things that keep going. So I think it's going to be a mixed bag. But I agree with what Laurence said. I think as a collective, we are better prepared for these things to happen now than we were 6 months ago, or certainly 12 months ago. So if we had to go back into a lockdown, or maybe not even that severe, but just we were planning to bring people back into the office, but now, do you know what, we're just going to carry on working from home. We know we can do that, and the vast majority of people, I think, know how to do that quite well now. So yeah, I suspect it wouldn't be as severe as what we've seen previously.
Lynne?
Yeah, I mean, really to add up to your points rather than layer any further, but I think if I remember how I personally felt in March last year in an industry which relies on two people meeting and then working together in an office, you think, well, thank goodness I feel more comfortable on video now than I did at that point. And I think for us than any other organisation, there was more crisis management. And then if we all remember how we felt second lockdown, well, certainly for me, the novelty of homeschooling was over. That was hard work. But aside from that, we all eased into it a lot, far easier. And I don't want to use that term, but it is the term that seemingly is that we do need to learn to live with this. And I think we have. And you speak to, I'd speak to chairmen that would have a portfolio of a travel company, a technology company, and an online pharmaceutical company, and give or take, those three types of organisations would level off with a budget of zero for the travel company and a double overnight for an online pharmaceutical company. So they're winners and losers, unfortunately, but I don't think it should be anything that anybody should be as sort of scared about or concerned about, because we have adapted so well as an industry and as individuals. I don't, aside from it being tiresome, I don't think we should be scared of it, because there will still be plenty of opportunities for people.
I agree.
I mean, it's a big question, this. Don't get me started on it. Around, personal responsibility. I'm the father to an 18-year-old that went off to the Reading Festival, and was meant to be going back to school today. And we've already had the conversation about, why would you have put yourself in that situation? And although they were testing people and doing all the rest of it, and the schools have been very good around this, but I think you're right. We're just going to have to get on with it. Potentially, there'll be a need for more people in government, because if we did go back to another lockdown, I think the current lot would probably get kicked out. Anyway, so look, following on from that, there's one that's come through in the chat, which I wanted to get onto, is how does the skill and experience shortage across the economy favour the interim market? Now, that is, of course, assuming there is a skill and experience shortage. We clearly know that if you're an HGV driver, there is. So I'm not sure whether there's an interim HGV market or not. But assuming there isn't, what sort of skills and specialisms are being demanded from interims, assuming that we are seeing a shortage on the supply side. David, do you want to open that one up?
Yeah. So particularly over the last 6, maybe 9 months, that increase in demand from the client side has been there. So now when we're working with a client, the candidates, whether they be permanent or interim, typically have multiple opportunities on the go at one time, and that certainly wasn't the case last year. Most people we represented only had that one opportunity. So now, most people at least have multiple opportunities to choose from, and therefore the speed of response from the client, obviously the rate they're offering, if it's a day rate, the length of contract, all these things that are coming into play, much more so than there were before. So it is more difficult to get the right people now, certainly, than it was 6, 9, definitely 12 months ago. Is there a skill shortage? I think, yes. I think ultimately there is. It's a more difficult. It's a nice problem to have, though. To be honest, I'd rather have the client demand than it be more difficult to find people than the other way around. Yeah. And I think that does play more into the hands of the candidate now. It's getting more of a candidate-driven market than a job-driven market. It's very much reversed, and I think that's giving the candidates a bit more bargaining power. To an extent. Does that?
Yeah, and I think it also, I'll just come in with John Wood's point. John has asked, with the changes driven by the pandemic, what's the panel's view on contract length? Are they shorter, longer? So again, that probably plays into the skill shortage, length of contract. Lynne, are you seeing any change on contract length?
I think when we look at our numbers, I think our contract length on average is probably about 9 months. I don't think that's significantly changed. I think what we potentially will see is organisations starting to put their money where their mouth is on their permanent structures. So for us, the first half of the year in our search business was incredibly strong. And actually, that's a really positive indicator for the broader market. I don't necessarily think there's a skill shortage necessarily across our, across the whole of the leadership structure and what we do, but there will be segments. So I don't know, for example, in finance, any kind of technical change, UK stocks, etc., coming in, there will then be a shortage of that pool of people. But according to a survey from the CIPD, organisations are planning on hiring more people over the coming few months than really over the last, I think it was about 8 years. So organisations are looking to grow, they're looking to increase their headcount. That will have an impact by its very nature on the interim side, albeit it might be covering senior hires rather than big fundamental change programs. There will be opportunities off the back of those permanent changes.
That's interesting. I wanted to pick up with you specifically, Laurence, on the question that we had from Adrian McLeod, who's asking, particularly interested in manufacturing, what movement do our panelists see regarding change or transformational project requirements going forward, and what estimated timescale? I know we were talking about impact of Brexit on various sectors, and we had that conversation this morning. Do you want to pick up on the trends in manufacturing?
Sure. Whilst I do that, I'll try and kind of give a nod to the other questions as well, around supply shortages, contract length, those sorts of things. So just high level trends that we're seeing in manufacturing. The circular economy and sustainable manufacturing is a massive point, and we're seeing more and more that the larger businesses are doing this well, and that the smaller ones just don't have the resource. They don't have the pockets. to allow them to produce their product in a way that's in line with what is now deemed the right way to do it, from an environmentally sustainable way, in a way that kind of has a positive impact on the world around them. So that is a big that is a big area. And as people of a certain age are coming up through the different stages of life, they're graduating, they're coming out into the working world, and they have money to spend. They are making decisions on where they work and where they spend their money, based on the sorts of things that they see online, the sorts of things that they can research and see in social media. And these individuals are going to be sat in boardrooms in the next 20 to 30 years, if not sooner, depending on how quickly they get through, and they will be making decisions on what direction they want to take companies in. So manufacturing is under the spotlight big time for that. Manufacturing's been under the spotlight anyway, because all you needed to do was pick up a newspaper, and any time last year with any media outlet levying abuse at our manufacturing industry, wondering why we're not producing our own PPE equipment. So there's loads of stuff. There's loads of different rabbit holes that we can dive into, but those are the two big areas: sustainability, but also how well are we able to kind of take care of our own when we really need to. So it's underneath all of that is the ongoing, ever evolving digital transformation that we're seeing in factories. Now that's what we're seeing in every industry, but within factories it's huge, and that is it's a massive area for us. Factory relocations, factory closures, factory modernization, so that businesses are able to streamline and operate more efficiently and produce more for lower costs in a sustainable way. Huge area for us, and it's ever evolving. It's very much like the digital and tech space. You travel forward 18 months, and everything that you were doing in present day all of a sudden becomes kind of left behind a little bit. So you can look at some organizations now in the UK, some of the larger ones. You could talk about the automotive sites that you can go and visit, the factories, or you could talk about Siemens, and you'd eat dinner off their floor. Like, the factories look incredible. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got Dickensian, kind of dusty old sites that you feel like you've gone back 200 years. So there's a massive gulf there, but also a huge opportunity for interims if they can find these slightly more in need of renovations and in need of upgrade, should we say, companies, as opposed to the ones that are already at the forefront. With regards to contract length, similar. It's not really been impacted. Kind of anything really from about 7 to 10 months is our average across the group, not just in manufacturing. And then just in terms of skill set shortages, absolutely, people who specialize in these the modernization of factories, but have 3 or 4 case studies of being able to do it. On a broader spectrum in manufacturing, to answer your question, Bruce, there is a massive problem. I saw an article on LinkedIn yesterday about it in the food industry. They're talking about massive shortages in meat, but it goes all the way across different manufacturing production in semi-skilled labor, people that can work in factories. So a lot of Eastern Europeans would work in our factories in the UK. Very hard working, very efficient, and a lot of them with Brexit have thought that there was a sensible time to leave, or maybe go and work in a European factory and get paid in euros. It would be easier to get it back to their home nation. So that's caused a problem. And that actually came at a time when a demand for production went up in 2017. So there was a kind of real conflicting challenges there. It's ongoing. When I speak to our CEO community and I say, what are the biggest challenges that you have at the minute? It isn't necessarily about selling their products. It's about people in the factories. It's not necessarily seen as a particularly attractive thing to do. Go and work on a factory line, rightly or wrongly. In my opinion, wrongly. It's kind of not positioned in the right way, and that sort of then all bleeds through into how the manufacturing companies are attracting top level graduates as well. Because if you get an engineering degree, let's say you get a first from a high caliber uni in the UK, in Germany or even in the States, you know, a real key area that that these graduates will look at would be manufacturing. They see it as quite a sexy, exciting area to go into, and also Japan and Korea. In the UK, it's the city. You know, if you've got a degree like that, people want to go and work for an investment bank, or they want to go and work for a tech firm. So that is another really big issue for the manufacturing industry. And the final one, whilst I'm on my soapbox, if I may, is that the manufacturing industry has, forgive me for a phrase that's getting banded out quite a lot at the minute, but it really is. If you look around the boardrooms, they are white, pale, and male. They have not modernized, and they have not brought a diverse crop of people through to lead their companies, which it needs to change. But it's so hard if you've not got that kind of fresh talent coming through at all the different levels, particularly at the entry level. So lots of challenges for UK manufacturing, a sector which I'm personally super passionate about. But it kind of there's so many different things that that could be improved and need to be improved.
Yeah. So look, we're coming into the last 10 minutes of this first session. Just reminding those of you that want to join the Institute and take part in these members-only sessions, that you can do that via the IAM website by going and registering now and signing up for the sessions. Those of you who are on that are members, get ready to move over to the green room with the other link. We'll be opening that up as soon as we close this one down and restarting the session at 20 past 1. So just in the final 10 minutes, I'd say keep the questions coming. Time for probably a few more, but just recapping on some of this. I mean, I'm hearing, you know, the words I'm hearing are, you know, PE, wall of money. It does exist. It is coming. Companies taking a long view. Clearly, things like health and digital. CMO was interesting. New ways of working. But I suppose the perfect storm that we thought was coming, created by Brexit, the pandemic, and of course we haven't mentioned IR35, but we probably should in passing. I suppose the real sea change that has come because, you know, due to the events of the last sort of 18 months or so, is just that speeding up of stuff that was already happening around new ways of working and digital. And again, I just wonder, you know, what you guys are beginning to see around that sort of stuff, you know, potentially AI, where interims perhaps are or can be those interims with that skill set on the leading edge of these things. You know, our clients beginning to kind of tune into that stuff. You know, David.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a client who we've just started working with. They're a new client to us, but with the chap who's worked with us before elsewhere. He's joined a firm in a sort of head of operational excellence type role, following that company being acquired by private equity. As part of his remit, he's been looking at, you know, what processes are manual, what can be automated, and how. So the ask from us is, you know, can you find us someone that knows about robotic process automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence, but also has that sort of process analysis bent to help us, you know, which processes are a candidate for automation and what would be the technology that we'd use for that. So the answer is yes. We are getting that type of work through now. We've got, that's just one example, and there's one of my colleagues is talking to another client about something similar.
Interesting. Lynne?
I mean, if I could touch on part of this question, Bruce, which was around different ways of working and using technology to advantage, but also I think it's worth flagging all the positives that have come from the last 18 months. And for us working in the interim market, it opens up a large part of of the globe, potentially, for individuals to consider working in. If you only have to pop up to an office once a week for a day or two, that's a very different concept to working there full time. So I do think we need to see the good aspects of what's come from lockdown, from hybrid working, from different ways of working, and for an interim to take a 6-month role in Manchester when they live in Southampton, it becomes very, very possible now, which perhaps historically it wasn't. So I think there's much to celebrate within the interim market in that regard.
Indeed. Laurence?
Yeah, do you know, I at the risk of being a little bit boring, I'm inclined to agree wholeheartedly with what Lynne just said. I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that the last 18 months have been, for some people and for some companies, they've been absolutely savage, and that's horrible. But there have been some wonderful good news stories as well. Just in terms of how the country and businesses and so many people have adapted has been amazing. So yeah, and without tech, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So it's absolutely accelerated the adoption of it. Honestly, Bruce, not seeing so much, not seeing greater demand for interims who have gone through a process of continuous learning or getting extra qualifications on the tech side. What I do see is that where there are huge levels of demand, not so much in manufacturing, but particularly in finance, is where we see people who are highly specialized in the technical field, or software companies and so on and so forth, that those individuals are never out of contract, and they command the highest rates that at the moment that we're seeing in the industry. So there's a definite, I'm not sure about the collection of people that we have on this call. I mean, that is a very, very happy hunting ground for people at the moment. If you're an interim and you are, one of the rare people out there who's right at the forefront of what's going on in the software industry, or the tech skills that come around helping financial institutions develop their presence in that space, you are not going to be out of work, and you're going to be able to charge high rates. How that transcends through to, or whether that does transcend through to manufacturing, it's more about the digital transformations in the factories and the SAP implementations, and just producing more for less cost. That's the kind of thing where we see demand.
So yeah, I mean, we'll pick this up in the coming weeks when we talk about we have the deep dive into finance, transformation, HR, and digital, and explore these topics in the full. So we're just running up to 15:15. There's a couple of minutes to go. So words of advice then in terms of the next 2 years from each of you. What's the kind of the thought, the major theme for the next 2 years, David?
I think we're going to be all right. Will be my summary. Yeah, we'll be all right. I think collectively we're feeling pretty positive about the next year or two. I do have a touch of, not, what's the word? It's still going to be a bit of a bumpy road. There's going to be some ups and downs. It's going to be a bit unpredictable, but I think broadly it's going to be a lot better than it has been for the last 18 months, or for various reasons. So I think keep the faith, keep going. And if you're a career interim and you do a good job, you'll get work.
Lynne?
Yeah, well said, David. We're going to be fine, aren't we? I mean, we speak to a lot of people that say, "Oh, I'm manufacturing, but I could happily get into software, for example," or so my skills are so transferable. Just be true to yourself and who you are and your offering, because the next day I'll speak to a software person that's desperate to get into manufacturing, and you kind of think just really know yourself, your skill set, what are your USPs, and really enjoy them, exploit them, and make the most of them, because there'll be somebody else they'll be trying to get into your industry or you step on your toes, but actually just be true to who you are and what you can offer clients.
And finally, Laurence.
Yeah, absolutely echo what David and Lynne have said. It is going to be fine. In actual fact, I think it's going to be good. I just close on the same piece of advice I give anybody who's either thinking of going to work as an interim or who's out of contract and they're currently working as an interim, which is, if you have this time might seem like I'm teaching people to suck eggs. If you have a low tolerance for unpredictability, or you're at a stage of life where working as an interim can be uncomfortable, you've got school fees to pay for, whatever, high mortgage. In this market right now, whilst I do believe it's going to be good, I truly believe it's going to be good, that's going to get uncomfortable at points. So you just absolutely just need to think about whether it suits you. Does it suit you? Can you tolerate 3 or 4 months being out of project? Can you tolerate 6? Are you a natural networker? Are you a natural hunter? Will you go out there and shamelessly shake the tree of the network of the people that you know in the ISPs, former clients, former employers? If you throw all of that into the hopper and it's something you're going to enjoy, you'll be great and you'll fly. I know some interims at the minute, they know I'm back from holiday. I've had 2 or 3 missed calls for them. It's a very, very sad situation for them. And so those individuals I'm advising, well, have you actually thought, given how unpredictable things might be in the next few months, have you thought about mixing it up? Have you thought about perhaps taking a permanent role if it's causing you this much stress? But if it's something that's manageable and you accept it as part of the journey, then I completely echo what David and Lynne have just said. I think it's going to be a really good time to be in the industry.
Okay, guys, we're going to close down now, and I'll see the members and the panelists over in the other room in about 5 minutes. Thank you all. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you very soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.